In the end, it may be that Trump's real opponent isn't named Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio or John Kasich, but perhaps it's Mitt Romney. Some people heard Governor Romney's speech on Thursday and thought, hey, maybe he's interested in the nomination. Well, Governor Romney joins me now this morning. Governor, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you, Chuck. Good to be with you.
Well, let me start with the results from last night. A better than expected night for Ted Cruz. Not as good of a night as Donald Trump thought he was going to have. You think you had an impact?
Oh, I think it had a big impact. I think a lot of people were surprised by how well Ted Cruz did. He got more delegates than Donald Trump last night. He was ebullient and enthusiastic. Donald Trump was uncharacteristically low energy last night. I think he was really surprised. This is a campaign that doesn't begin to be over. It's broken all the rules of history so far, and I have a feeling it's going to break a few more before we're finished.
So with Ted Cruz, do you believe he has emerged as the chief anti-Trump candidate, and are you ready to back him?
Well, I think he's emerging right now. He's obviously had a very strong night, won 7 states to Donald's, 10 states. And yet I wouldn't write off Marco Rubio or John Kasich at this point. Marco Rubio, very strong in Florida. More recent polls there have him within a few points of Donald Trump. And John Kasich leading in Ohio. So they may be favorite son candidates, or they may emerge down the road as being a very strong candidate on their own.
You had said it's a time for choosing. You seem to indicate that on March 16th, it's a time for choosing. Is that when you're going to endorse an alternative officially?
I may well at that point. It depends, of course, on what happens that night. You know, I'm leaning towards supporting someone and going out on the campaign trail and trying to convince people to vote for the person who I think can help the country at a very critical time, and who also can represent conservative values and conservative ideals. A real deal Republican, if you will.
Well, let me just confirm. Are you comfortable supporting John Kasich, Marco Rubio, or Ted Cruz, any one of those 3 candidates against Donald Trump?
Absolutely. Any one of those 3 is a real Republican. They've demonstrated over time that they share conservative values. There's some differences on policy or on tactics to implement policy, but I'd be very proud having any one of them at the top of the ticket. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is someone who represents something entirely different and, in my view, is not at all the real deal. This is a guy who pretends to be one thing and is something else entirely.
You know, I want to go to something you said about Donald Trump's business background in your speech last Thursday. Let me play a clip.
His bankruptcies have crushed small businesses and the men and women who work for them. He inherited his business. He didn't create it. And whatever happened to Trump Airlines? How about Trump University? And then there's Trump Magazine and Trump Vodka and Trump Steaks and Trump Mortgage. A business genius he is not.
However, when you accepted his endorsement 4 years earlier, this is what you said about his business background.
Donald Trump has shown an extraordinary ability to understand how our economy works, to create jobs for the American people. I spent my life in the private sector, not quite as successful as this guy, but successful nonetheless.
Governor, all those unsuccessful businesses that you outlined on Thursday, Trump Airlines, Trump University, Trump Vodka, those were all failures before 2012 as well. Were you just sort of saying something you had to say 4 years ago in order to accept his endorsement?
Well, Donald Trump has made a lot of money for himself. And there's no question that he's got a lot of money in his pockets and has been successful on that score. But if you look at his record overall, and there are other, by the way, failures, you say, okay, he made a lot of money for himself. He inherited a lot of money from his dad. But this is not a guy who's a self-made man. And this is a guy who's crushed a lot of people along the way.
Well, why'd you say nice things about him 4 years ago in his business? Why'd you say so many nice things about his business career when clearly you're not impressed?
You know, he's made a lot of money for himself, and I'm gracious enough in a setting where someone has endorsed me to point out that he's been successful, made a lot of money, he has a lot of hotels and so forth, but you can't also ignore the fact that he's had a lot of failures, and he tries to sell himself in this campaign as nothing but successful. He's not a loser. You know what? He's lost time and time again, and he's crushed a lot of people in the process. And the thing that I find most unusual and perhaps outrageous is that even though he says he's worth $10 billion, he finds it in his interest to go out and bilk people of $10,000 here, $15,000 there for Trump University. These people have really been scammed. And I want to make sure the American people are not subject to the same kind of scam as we nominate a president.
I understand that, but I want to go, you laid out a whole bunch of things that you thought disqualified Trump, not just his business background. You thought his support for terrorists could lead to a trade war. You were pretty critical of the vulgar language that he uses, the insulting of Muslims. But you know, he was pretty insulting of Muslims 4 years ago. He was the face of the birther movement, which has been totally discredited. And I got to play you something here. In 2011, listen to this vulgarity he used.
The messenger is important. I could have one man say, we're going to tax you 25%. And I could say another, listen, you we're going to tax you 25%.
Governor, it's Sunday morning, so we had to beep that out. But it was this horrible, frankly, F-bomb tirade that he went on. It's been making the rounds on YouTube, again, in 2011. So I go back. Do you believe you mainstreamed Trump, made him acceptable, and do you regret it?
Chuck, there are a lot of people who supported me who I'm sure used the F-bomb. In other words, I had 61 million people vote for me in the general election, and I'm not endorsing all 61 million people for president, and I'm happy to accept the endorsement of a lot of people who I disagree with on some issues, and some people who I wouldn't want to be associated with the things they say. But I, at this stage, am at a point where we're looking at Donald Trump and the future of the country. And we say to ourselves, is someone with his record and someone who believes the things he believes, which in my view would lead to a recession and to a trade war and would lead to a world being less safe. Do we want that person to be president of the United States? Do we want that clip you just saw being on TV for our kids to see time and time again? Even the debate, the presidential debate last week, Donald Trump is saying something I don't want my grandkids to watch. So this guy, look, he may be colorful, he may have made a lot of money for himself. He is not the person who should be president of the United States.
But in hindsight, I take it you're embarrassed that you stood next to Donald Trump 4 years ago.
You know, some of the things he said more recently would have made it difficult for it, particularly with regards to the Ku Klux Klan, things he said about Muslims in general. Look, I'd have had a very difficult time standing next to him 4 years ago.
Let me ask you this. You know, you made that compelling speech. Some people called it the clearest indictment of Trump yet that anybody had done. And hours later, the three candidates running against Donald Trump sat on a debate stage and all pledged to support him if he's the nominee. Did that disappoint you?
I think it was expected. They had been asked that from the very beginning of the campaign, and they'd pledged to support whoever the nominee was, and they had to stand by their pledge. But you saw that, with few exceptions, they hesitated when it came time to answer that question. It was a difficult one for them to swallow, and I respect the fact that they honored their word, as Ted Cruz said. But Donald Trump is a more and more difficult person to support, in part because he says, look, he's going to become presidential, he'll act presidential, and yet even on that debate stage and in his reaction to my speech, he's anything but presidential.
You have said you will not support either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton for president, that you would look for another way. Maybe you skip the vote, maybe you vote for a third-party candidate. Is Donald Trump becoming president worse in your mind than Hillary Clinton becoming president?
Both of them are pretty darn bad. As Lindsey Graham said, you know, a poison or a bullet. And I'm going to be voting, but I'll vote for someone who's on the ballot that I think is a real conservative and who would make us proud. And I may write in a name if I can't find such a person.
Do you believe there should be, if Trump's going to be on a glide path to the nomination, do you think there should be a concerted third-party effort by Republicans? Maybe it's the Constitution Party, maybe it's something else?
I'm not going to encourage at this stage the creation of a new party, but I think it would be very difficult for Donald Trump in the final analysis to get the nomination. I think we're going to nominate someone who really represents our party, and I believe that'll happen in the process leading up to the convention. But if the convention has no one person getting a majority of the delegates, then we'll have the 2,000 plus delegates there, and they'll have to make an assessment. They were elected by their people in their respective states. They'll make the judgment as to who should be our nominee.
You told Matt Lauer, my colleague, on Friday that you would not be a candidate for president. But let me ask you the way General Sherman was once asked. If nominated, will you accept the nomination? If your name is placed in the nomination and was elected at this Cleveland convention, would you accept it?
You know, I can't imagine anything like that happening, and I don't think anyone in our party should say, oh no, even if the people in the party wanted me to be the president, I would say no to it. No one's going to say that. But I can tell you this, I'm not a candidate. I'm not going to be a candidate. I'm going to be endorsing one of the people who's running for president, and one of the people, I can guarantee you this, one of the people running for president, one of the four, is going to be the Republican Party nominee. 3 of the 4 are people I would endorse, but I'm not running, and I'm not going to be running.
All right, Governor Mitt Romney, I will have to leave it there. Governor, thanks for coming on. Good to see you.
Thanks, Chuck. Good to be with you.
You got it. When we come back.